The narcissist is a button pusher. They know what to do and say to upset you, and they will do this whenever they need their narcissistic supply inflated. While it may seem the narcissist isn't paying attention to you, they are closely watching you. They don't watch you to show interest and to build a bond. Rather, they are watching you so they know what your weaknesses are, and they can use those weaknesses against you when it is most convenient for them. The narcissist will always use others as a way to feel better about themselves. When they can point the finger at others and never have to take responsibility for their own actions, they can continue to be abusive and controlling. While the narcissist will never change, you are capable of change, and it is important for you to act in a way which doesn't allow the narcissist ready access to abuse and control. One effective technique you can do for yourself, which shows the narcissist that you are worthy of respect, is to set boundaries with the narcissist. Today I will discuss what a boundary is and why you must set boundaries with the narcissist. But first, I'm Dr. Emily Mayfield, a licensed psychologist. Thank you for watching this video and being a part of the Mindset Therapy family. Let's start with what a boundary is. A boundary is defined by the individual and is a limit they are willing to accept with certain behaviors. The boundary is meant to protect the person's own needs and beliefs and to help them maintain their integrity. When you define a boundary, you are communicating what behaviors you consider acceptable for your own life. The boundary is defined by the individual and no one else. As you can expect, to create a boundary, you must be aware of your own wants and needs. You need to know what you find acceptable to be able to define the boundary. As you define the boundary, it doesn't need to be in consideration of others and whether they would agree with it. Your boundary is for you to define and doesn't need to be approved by anyone else. If you don't value yourself and your own opinions, then it will be very difficult to define your own boundaries. Once you define your boundary, it must be communicated to others. This step is often overlooked by people. It would be great if people just read our minds and knew what we wanted. However, that isn't realistic, and it also isn't someone else's responsibility to be able to know what your boundaries are. For boundaries to be effective, they must be communicated. The most important part of boundaries is not only creating a boundary, but keeping the boundary. If you set a boundary and tell people what is acceptable or not acceptable, you must keep that boundary and not modify it because someone doesn't like it or they are pressuring you to change your boundary. When you communicate your boundary, you don't have to explain why you set the boundary. Similarly, you don't have to explain why you are keeping the boundary. When someone doesn't like your boundary, they will push against it and hope you change or remove the boundary. This is solely for their benefit. If you don't keep the boundary you have set, then you are letting it be known that your boundary isn't serious and can be modified. This wears at your self-worth and self-confidence because you tried to make yourself a priority, but then someone comes in and attempts to tear you down. So, in summary, for boundaries, you want to identify what your boundary is, communicate this boundary to others, and keep the boundary even if someone pushes against it. You owe no one an explanation about your boundary to include why it exists and why you refuse to change it. Now that we have discussed what boundaries are, let's talk about an example boundary and how you can keep the boundary without explaining yourself or the reason for the boundary. Let's say you have a narcissist in your life. This can be a partner, friend, parent, coworker, or any other type of relationship. The narcissist will name call when they are upset with you and don't get their way. For example, they may say, "Are you stupid? Can you not do anything right? Go do what I told you to do and do it right this time." This statement from the narcissist is abusive. There's name calling and belittling. This abuse isn't acceptable under any circumstances. Even if you didn't do something correctly, there are healthy ways for the person to communicate with you. When creating your boundary in response to this abuse from the narcissist, the first thing you need to do is decide for yourself what is acceptable and what isn't. If you have endured years of emotional abuse, you may not value yourself and have the confidence to prioritize yourself. But an appropriate boundary you can set with yourself is that name-calling and belittling is never acceptable. Thus, the boundary you have defined for yourself is, it is never okay to call me names or put me down. Now that you have defined the boundary to yourself, you must communicate the boundary to the narcissist. For example, when they say, "Are you stupid? Can you not do anything right? Go do what I told you to do and do it right this time." Your immediate response would be, "It is never okay to call me names and put me down." This is directly in line with your boundary and now has been communicated to the narcissist. It is also a well-defined boundary that doesn't explain why it isn't okay, why you feel the way you do, or any other explanation. You have simply stated what they said was not okay, and the reason for it being unacceptable doesn't need to be defined in that moment. What will likely happen next is the narcissist will attack your boundary by reconfirming you are stupid, saying you don't listen, can't do anything right, or any other form of continued demeaning behaviors where they don't have to take responsibility for their actions. The narcissist wants you to back down and take back the boundary you have set. So, if the narcissist pushes against your boundary, how should you respond? The most important thing to remember is don't fall into the trap of trying to explain yourself or your boundary. This is exactly what the narcissist wants from you, to focus on yourself and not on them. The more time you spend explaining your boundary, the less focus there is on the actual issue for which the boundary was set. The narcissist is a master of distraction, and while the initial focus was on their wrongdoing, you now find yourself defending your own boundary. If the narcissist continues to push against your boundary, don't get into a battle of wills with them. Step away from the interaction. This stepping away is reconfirming the boundary that their actions aren't acceptable and you won't remain in the interaction with them as long as they continue to be abusive. Yes, there are times where leaving can escalate the situation into possible physical responses from the narcissist. However, for now, this is how you should handle boundary setting in most situations where you feel safe to do so. One final thought on boundaries is they shouldn't come off as ultimatums. A boundary should never be, "Stop doing X," or "I will do Y." For ultimatums, you are saying if you don't get your way, you will retaliate. A boundary isn't meant to be retaliatory. It isn't a tit for tat or do this or else I will do that. The boundary is a way to show respect for yourself, and it isn't meant to become a form of retaliation if you don't get your way. If the narcissist continually pushes against your boundaries, don't think you have to change your boundaries to make the narcissist nicer or happier. The problem is with the narcissist and not with you. Whether you have a boundary or not, the narcissist will be abusive. Focus on not changing who you are and develop respect for yourself. The narcissist will do whatever they think they need to in order to make everything about someone else. Set and keep your boundaries and let the narcissist figure out how to get out of this situation and stop rescuing them by devaluing yourself. To learn more about how to get respect from narcissists, click on the video in the corner, or you can find the link in the description below. See you at the next video.